Okay, and we are live. Let's see. So I'm gonna tweak my settings just for a couple minutes here and hopefully get some people to join in on the stream. My wife's telling me that I'm live. Yes, I know I'm live. Thank you. Okay, here we go. Okay, so thank you for joining me live. This is my second live stream on this channel, so forgive me if I kind of muddle my way through it. I'm used to uh, tracking videos and then presenting them later. So I wanted to do a live stream. This is the end of the year, making some predictions for the camera companies, and I have a list of them right there to go down, and just make it a fun conversation. So. What I thought I'd do was start out at the companies that no one cares about, like Pentax is at the top of that list, quickly followed by OM Systems, and kind of go down the line. So I want to go over camera bodies, lenses. A lot of these companies had oh, I forgot to put Hasselblad in there. Somebody likes Hasselblad, I think. A lot of these companies had some really awesome cameras released in 2022. And what's cool about that is it seems like for the past couple of years, really during the lockdown and through the pandemic, there haven't been a whole lot of cameras um, that have come out that were really groundbreaking. So I think the Fuji XH2S is a notable exception to that. It's a fantastic camera. I think the Canon R5C tried to be an exception to that, and I think it is. R5C is something that it could take Canon certainly a whole new direction forward. So we will start out with Pentax, everybody's favorite. Um, I don't know if I've ever even seen a Pentax camera. Maybe. Maybe in a camera shop or something at some point, I saw a Pentax camera, but I don't know if I've ever even seen a Pentax camera. I certainly have never seen anybody use one. What is my prediction for Pentax in 2023? Well, Pentax is going to, if they survive, which, that is questionable, then they are going to continue building cameras for old men. Um, DSLRs with big antiquated SLR lenses. And old men, because they have Pentax lenses, will continue to buy Pentax. And so I think that's all there is to say about that. OM Systems used to be Olympus, one of the champions of Micro Four Thirds. Now, what's funny about OM Systems is the local camera shop to me in Santa Rosa, California, Shutterbug Camera, has, I don't know if they still do, but a couple years ago, they had a whole section for Olympus, like a big, 10-foot section of display wall for Olympus cameras. But when you went over to, let's say, Fuji, they had just a little tiny section for Fuji. And that's one of those things where, that kind of shows you that the camera shops, the local camera shops, are so slow to kind of catch up to what the rest of the world is moving to. They have the same 50 old guys that come in there all the time and they're looking for Pentax or looking for Olympus, so OM Systems used to be Olympus, now under Chinese ownership. The OM1 or 5 or whatever they're up to, it's okay. I mean, it's weather sealed really good, allegedly. I think Jared Pullen like took a shower with one or whatnot. I mean, I guess that's cool. If you're into taking a shower with a camera. Uh, I don't know. It's I could see it's the whole thing about Micro Four Thirds, right? And this gets into Panasonic, which we'll get into too. Is there any room in the world for a Micro Four Thirds sensor that really it's hard to get shallow focus on a Micro Four Thirds sensor? So is there any room in the world for that? I think for particular types of like birders like that, because their lenses get really long and focusing on birds in flight and such is a bit easier when you don't have that shallow focus to think about. But for most of the world, I don't think Micro Four Thirds makes a whole lot of sense. Um, I think it is going to go the way of the dodo. The only exception to that, I think, could be in video, especially as it pertains to like, say, the Blackmagic, studio cams, the little box ones that are, the Studio 4K and the whatever, those are Micro Four Thirds mounts, just like the Pocket 4K, and, those can be useful, especially because you can they all talk to each other, and you can control them. So, like, for churches, mounting them up on the back of the walls in the sanctuary and stuff, they're really good for that kinda thing. Okay, going on to Panasonic. Panasonic is a an interesting the leadership in Panasonic makes interesting decisions, and, the big thing with Panasonic for a long time has been their focusing system and, going not going to a phase detect, but staying with a contrast detect. Now, I think they have a phase detect, focusing system now. Um, I don't know if it's any good, and I'm not really sure, and I think this is Panasonic's biggest problem, is I'm not really sure who Panasonic is for. Um, who uses a Panasonic camera? Now, it was different a couple years ago when the S1H came out, and, this is a full frame, 6K or 5K or whatever it does, camera. Panasonic colors have always been, with the Varicams and stuff, thought to be very nice, but they haven't had an S1H, really in a couple years. So, the GH5, and now we're up to the GH6, I think, or is the GH6 worse? But whatever the replacement for the GH5 and then the GH5 Mark II was, it's okay. I mean, it's kinda like the old ones. Stability is really good, because it has a tiny little sensor that you can move around within that lens mount, really well. Other than that, I don't know. Here's the thing too. When I look at the cameras, I am a working real estate photographer, and so, one of the things that I see with small sensor cameras like the Micro Four Thirds is I am never ever going to be able to find lenses that are both wide enough and well enough corrected to really be generally useful to me. And so, with the exception of, let's say, Blackmagic Pocket 4Ks, which you can put a speed booster on and get a full frame perspective, thereabouts, Micro Four Thirds just doesn't interest me at all. It, usually it's no good. That's the thing. And I think especially when it comes to lenses, a lot of most of the lenses that are being developed these days are, really around the full frame system, and the best lenses, like the Canon RF lenses, are being developed for full frame systems. So Panasonic, meh. What are they gonna do in 2023? Well, they're gonna do more than Pentax and OM systems. I think they're probably going to, release a camera with phase detect. I think it's time for Panasonic to do that, and I think 2023 is ripe for the picking, but it's hard to tell the direction of Panasonic. They don't seem to be interested in stills at all. They kinda just seem to be interested in video, and, um, I mean, they are way, way back from the leaders here. So, okay, let's move on to something a little bit different. Let's move on to Hasselblad. And Hasselblad is, let me see if I can bring this up here. So, a lot of people don't know a lot about Hasselblad cameras because, they're super expensive. I don't know why this is backwards. So, medium format mirrorless, 81.99. This X2D 100C that they have here. It is 100 megapixels. It's a Fuji sensor, which so it's the same sensors in the Fuji GFX 100S, I believe, and that is a Sony sensor. So it's like, it's like that Tropic Thunder, quote, as I'm just a dude playing the dude, pretend to be another dude. That's kinda that's the Hasselblad X2D. For $8,100, it could be yours. Is it good? I mean, gosh, it better be, right? Um, the lenses are good, but, so what are they gonna do in 2023? Um, I don't think they have to do anything. They play in a different sandbox, and, that's the thing, it's some of these companies like Hasselblad and like Phase One, they play in a different sandbox, and they're okay to play in that sandbox. The professionals that use those cameras are, using them for very specific reasons. They enjoy the images that they get out of them. They typically are getting paid a lot to deliver those images to clients. And Hasselblad is perfectly fine just being a smaller company making esoteric cameras not for the masses. And um, let's talk about Fuji, because Fuji's next. Now, Fuji is one of the stranger lineups, on this list because they kind of skirt full frame, so they have APS-C cameras and they have medium format cameras. And um, the thing that's really strange about, well, I guess it's not strange. They're choosing not to compete in the full frame market, and that everybody knows is dominated by Sony and Canon. Um, and Nikon is a distant third, but they're in there too. Fuji is different because they choose not to participate in that race, which I think is smart, actually. So they have their XF cameras, which is their APS-C line, and I actually had an XT3 for a brief time, and again, putting it in perspective, I'm a real estate photographer, and so they had the 8 to whatever millimeter lens, and it was okay, and then they had a 10 to whatever millimeter zoom lens too, and it was okay too. They weren't great, they weren't really well corrected. Um, the rest of the camera, the way that you control the camera wirelessly and, the maximum flash sync on the mechanical shutter and all that, it's like it wasn't meant to they aren't meant to do the work that I want to do. I think a lot of times when you see Fuji, the APS-C cameras, I think are marketed really toward creators, and influencers and things like that. The colors are lovely. They have a lot of you can do approximations of the older film stock, like the Astia and Provia and that kind of stuff. And the colors are fantastic out of the Fuji cameras. It's just, for what I do, shooting commercially and shooting real estate, it's just, there are better systems out there. I actually know somebody with, Carlos Quintero has a GFX, one of the medium format ones, the GFX 100S, and he loves it. He takes it on vacation. He's the only guy, doing some like weird bar tour, with a medium format camera, but um, he loves it, and the sensor is quite lovely. So that system actually tempts me, the Fuji medium format system. Maybe I'll get a hold of one someday and see what it's all about. So let's move on to some of the bigger companies now, bigger companies in the stills. And so let's start with Nikon. Now, Nikon is, I think, the sleeper of the bunch, right? So Sony cameras. Um, oh, sorry, I got a comment here. So Florian, GF system has insane image quality. Recently had a chance to try the GFX 100 with the new 20-35 millimeter lens. Yeah, I know. I've seen enough about the GF system, and like I said, Carlos has one. And he's always. I'm really interested in that, but honestly, I'm kind of interested in the Hasselblad too. It really depends on the lenses, and I don't know if I think Hasselblad has, like, I think both of them have, like, their own mount. See, that's the other thing, like, when you get up into the medium format stuff, and sorry, I'm sidetracking because I saw Florian's comment here. When you get into the medium format stuff, you don't hear the noise about, let's say, when Canon got rid of their third-party lens mount, and and you got everybody's all pissed off. Canon got rid of their third party lenses and stuff. When you take a look at like the Hasselblads and the Phase ones and the Fuji, GFXs and stuff for the world, it's all very proprietary closed ecosystem. Um, it's all expensive, and you don't have people pissing and moaning that they can't put a Chinese lens on the thing. So take that for what it is. So King Crut Gaming, hey, good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Hasselblad, I know, right? They just look like, you know. And sorry again that this is backwards, but you know, I don't know why it's backwards. Actually, my whole feed is backwards. I don't know how that happened on YouTube here. Let me see. I'm not going to push any buttons. I'm going to jack it up if I do. But like, yeah, yeah, you feel like a baller with Hasselblad. So, Okay, so I was getting into Nikon, so I'm gonna I'm gonna stop talking about Hasselblad for now, and get into Nikon. So I think Nikon is actually probably the sleeper of the bunch as far as like the full frame camera manufacturers go. I think Nikon's the sleeper. I think Nikon, I think, has to know that they have to get into video in a real way, and make a video camera because they are never, ever, ever going to take market share away from Canon and from Sony without doing video. It is way too integral to Canon and Sony's dominance of the market that pretty much all of their cameras, even the ones that are made to shoot stills, are very capable video cameras. Now, that's not saying that the Nikon, recent Nikon cameras like the Z9 and such, they aren't capable video cameras, because I think they are, but they're not aimed, toward that crowd. And I think if Nikon ditches their kind of old man, this is your father's Nikon um, type of identification, then obviously that's going to be better for him. And I think the best way for him to do that is to really get into video, and really get the influencers on board. Because you know, so those of you may not know this, but I actually shot primarily on Nikon before I went to Sony, and I went to Sony with the A7 III in 2018, I think it would have been. But before then, I was shooting on Nikon crop bodies, and I had a D7200, and which I still think is a fantastic camera. I wish that I had kept it. And there's something just really, really nice about just the Nikon colors, and a lot of the glass is really good. Like, I mean, there's a lot to like about Nikon cameras. There really is, and like on Nikon lenses. But until they get into video and they get serious about getting into video, and they have dedicated video and even cinema cameras like Sony and like Canon, because these are two companies now that they have, you can use the same lenses on the full frame stills bodies as you can on their full on cinema cameras. Canon and Sony are both like that now. So Nikon, it really needs, they really need to catch up. That's how they're going to catch up. That's the only way they're going to catch up and take any market share from these companies. And so I'm going to make a bold prediction. I'm going to say in 2023, Nikon gives us a video camera, and I think it is within the capability of Nikon to do it in a way that shakes up the industry, and I hope they do. And so, all right, so I left Canon and Sony. I'm going to talk about some cinema cameras too, but I left Canon and Sony as far as these like you know, these normal ones um till last. And I'm going to kind of talk about them together, because with Canon and Sony, it's hard to talk about one without talking about the other. They are really that close. And I have both. I use both. This is being shot right now on a Canon R5C, and this has become kind of like my main studio camera, the Canon R5C. And the reason that's true is because I don't want to deal with it outside of the studio. But it looks great like this. It's a great camera to do this kind of thing on. So I shoot Canon and I shoot Sony. Um, the competition between these two companies is awesome for all of us. If you were to ask me which one is on top right now, I don't think I could say, really. I think the A1 is the best stills camera the world has ever seen, period. That is just, in my mind, not even debatable. I think Canon makes better video cameras than Sony, and I think that also is not debatable. So where does that leave you when you have two companies that are so neck and neck, and they both are designing hybrid mirrorless cameras that do both stills and video? It leaves you with a tough call, but it also leaves you with one that you can't really go wrong with either Canon or Sony. When you're picking up and you're spending a few $1,000s on a full frame Canon body or a full frame Sony body, and especially when you have, um, their highest end native lenses, so the L series RF mount for the Canon or the G Master lenses for the Sony, um, it is very hard to call a winner on that. I think that, Sony is a marketing juggernaut, you know, and Sony is kinda it's funny because so those of you who weren't around in 2018, let's say, right, when the Sony A7 III. Now I also, I often point to the Sony A7 III as the most important camera in the past decade, for this industry, and I really think that's true because that is the first camera that saw professionals moving from other manufacturers like Nikon and like Canon en masse over to a mirrorless camera. And now, you take a look and the only company that's still making not mirrorless cameras, so DSLRs, is companies like Pentax. And like I said before, I don't know if I've ever even seen one, outside of some used section in some camera shop, right? So the A7 III, it was a big deal. It was a full frame camera. It was $2,000. It shot relatively fast. It had the colors that are a little bit better even than the A9. It had the low light capability of the A9. And before the A7 III, the A9 was kind of an oddity. It's like, well, here's this $5,000. I mean, it's a beast, and it was like it was kind of mind bending at the time, actually, the A9, like the capabilities of it versus the DSLRs, that were out in the wild at that time. The A9 kind of walked on them, but at the same time, it's like, well, here's this $5,000. It's a very expensive camera. Um, it's tiny. People really didn't know what to think about that because they're used to these, giant cameras with giant batteries, and it's tiny. Uh, and there's no native long glass, and I think that's really the thing that made the A9, the first A9, not really that successful, is it was a very expensive camera with very limited options as far as glass is concerned. And so when you're taking, it's a sports camera, it's an expensive camera. And when you're taking guys that are shooting 1DXs and things like that of the day. The Nikon D4, I think, was the one at that time, and big chunky cameras and big giant batteries and catalogs of lenses that are like 50, 100 lenses deep, to choose from. They're not going to go over to that camera, but when the A7 III came out, it took everything that was great about the A9 and just dumbed it down a bit. Um, it's not as solid feeling as the A9. It doesn't shoot quite as fast, you know, but it has better video specs than the A9 actually because it oversamples in 4K. I don't think the A9 did. And it was $2,000. And for a full frame camera of any variety at that time, that was a big deal. People immediately recognized that that was an amazing system. The 16 to 35 G Master was newly out at that time too, and that's been my workhorse lens for years, the 16 to 35 G Master. It's a fantastic lens. Still, it's a fantastic lens, and it's 5-year-old lens now, so they're probably gonna refresh that at some point. So, um, it was the first camera that got the mirrorless thing going. Canon was playing catch up for a while. The RF lenses are insane. So the lens that I'm shooting on right now actually is the 28 to 70 f2. It's big, chody, like $4,000 or whatever it is lens. It's incredible. It looks like a collection of primes, um, you know, and that's what Canon came out with their RF system, but they also came out with that turd called the EOS R, and it just wasn't a good camera. Uh, I know people are gonna smash the keyboard about that, right? So sorry, anybody who's EOS R fans. It just wasn't a good camera, and I know that for me and for a lot of people who use these cameras in the course of working with them, the big thing was it only had 1 card slot, and that's just I have had cards fail, and if you haven't had cards fail, it's just because you haven't shot enough yet, because cards do fail. They can and will and do fail. So, having being able to shoot redundant, which I always do, um, that's a big deal to me, and that's one of the reasons, by the way, that I like like, let's say, the A1 over the Canon R5. One of those reasons is because anything that I can do on the A1, the biggest frame rates, the biggest codecs, I can redundantly record because it has 2 symmetrical CF Express Type A slots in it, whereas the Canon R5 and the R5C, even though it has a CF Express Type B card in it, which is much faster than a CFX-A, the card slots are asymmetrical, so there's a CFXB and then a UHS-2 SD card, and so for stills, you can still redundantly do raw stills to both cards. For video, it can't handle on that UHS-2 the biggest frame rates, so you can do proxies or something like that, but that's really, you're limited. If that card borks out, then, that's that. So, Canon and Sony, hard to call a winner. What are they gonna do in 2023? I think that Sony is I don't know, man. I'm more excited about Canon, actually. I think is Canon has become the more adventurous company, They're the ones that kinda throw caution to the wind, and it doesn't work out for them all the time, like, i.e., the R5 heat thing, right? It's like, why was the R5 heat thing even a thing? Well, it's because they put 8K in the thing and then they market it as an 8K camera, and so they gotta figure out how to make it work with 8K, and then it was a firmware, so who knows? But yeah, they kinda throw caution to the wind. I don't think Sony does that. So, I mean, Sony is still the one. Okay, the FX6 that you can't even find again, and still, they said it was gonna be available in December, right? There are guys that have been waiting for these things for 18 months, okay? Somebody told me he put in his order for an FX6 18 months before he got it. Now that's insane, you know? Now this camera, which is like Sony's latest, greatest, really best video camera outside of the Venice and even then, right, is only 4K. It's only 4K, and it only has the sensor of a camera that you can get for half the price in the A7S III and the FX3. So that is a very, very conservative way to go. Whereas Canon, on the other hand, okay, now we're talking about them perhaps coming out with a full frame DGO sensor, and that's a big deal. And I was talking with my buddy Carlos, and we have these kind of conversations a lot, and I said, look, if Canon comes out with a full frame DGO cinema camera, I'm gonna buy a pair of them and not look back, you know, and especially if the rumors are true, they are gonna be in cahoots with Red to put Red code on this full frame DGO cinema camera. Like, that is crazy. I don't think anybody who, wouldn't like that. So, that brings us to Red, so Red is a company who gosh, I love Red. I really do. It's hard not to like Red because they are an American company through and through. Um, they are market disruptors. They came on the scene when they did as a market disruptor. Their thing at first was 4K for $4,000, right? And they accomplished that. Okay, now they do 6K for $6,000, right? With the Komodo. Now I have a Komodo, and when they came out with the Raptor, it's hard to want to buy the Raptor, not because the Raptor is not worth the $25,000 asking price, but because the Komodo is such a good deal at $6,000. It really is, and any naysayers for Red out there, um, you gotta just use one. You gotta use one, and maybe I'll make a video that shows the difference. This is actually a good one to do. So it shows the difference between uh, even the small things like control apps, right? So if you have the Canon control app for the R5 series cameras like the R5C here, then the Sony control app for all of their cameras, and then the Red control app. And when you see how much better the Red app is, and just how you can it's like no latency. You can control every single thing about the camera. You can control multiple cameras, as one group when you're doing multicam shoots. You can define focus racks from this point to that point. You can define the rack speed and everything. With the latest update with their app, now it does face detect autofocus, and for a camera shooting 16-bit 6K RAW, that's a big deal. So it does face detect autofocus. You can set up the face detect autofocus in a couple different ways. And so you can do the original face. So for a talking head, it'll just stick on the original face, or you can do the second face, right? So you have a talking head like this, it's focused on the face. Somebody else comes in, it then racks to their face. That's pretty awesome, and that's the kind of thing that kind of shows you that's the thing that Red does is stuff like that, where it's like, I never even thought of that, but now that you're giving it to me, um, I can think of some creative ways to use that tool. And the other thing that Red does really just Red and Ari both do this really well. Okay, the companies that make the cinema cameras and cinema camera companies both do this really well. They don't release something that doesn't work, so when they tell you that it's going to do this, it will do that. And you won't get a bunch of people online trashing anything because, oh, it heats up, or it does this, or it only does that thing they say it's going to do in this mode, but not in that mode. Like, no, the cameras, they work. They work, and when they give you those advanced features, those features work too. Now that's something that the more pedestrian cameras that we're talking about here, like the Canons and the Sonys and the Nikons and such, they rely on firmware updates. And I think the problem with that is, they're trying to beat each other to the punch so bad, that they're releasing half-baked cameras. And the R5C is like the poster child for this. I call it skunk works, because it just seems like something that was built in some back shop somewhere. It was a rush to market product that was made to fix the fallout from the R5 heat thing, and so, okay, well, we're going to give the thing a fan in it and, and just go for it. But there are so many things that are wrong with the R5C, and most of them have to do with the delineation between the stills operating system and the video operating system, and how that throttles actually a lot of capabilities with video versus just the regular R5, So for instance, you can't wirelessly monitor with the R5C when you're shooting video. So I'm shooting on the R5 right now. I've got a monitor right here, or I wouldn't be able to see myself, you know? Um, the autofocus system isn't as good as the R5, it's another thing. And why is that? Well, it's because they just kinda put one of these and one of those, and there you go. It was a rush to market camera, so I think the R5 Mark II is probably gonna be what the R5C should have been. It should be more, amalgamated in its feature set. Alright, so let's go to Ari, everybody's favorite. Um, okay, Hollywood loves them. They are incredible. They are the price of a luxury car, and I don't know anybody with an Ari. Um, I know people who use Aris. See, that's the other thing with Ari is that nobody owns them. It's just you rent an Ari when you need an Ari, you're not gonna buy that thing. What are you, crazy? So, yeah, that's it. They're awesome. They're awesome. They're like 100 grand. Moving on. What are they gonna do in 2023? Well, they're gonna keep being awesome and keep shooting movies for Hollywood. Black Magic. So Black Magic is everybody's love to hate it company, right? And I have a Black Magic. I have a Pocket 6K around here somewhere. I think it's over there. Um, everybody's been wanting Black Magic to do a box style video camera for a long time. And what's funny about this is when Black Magic a few years ago, when they unveiled the Pocket 6K Pro, the newer one that has the flip up screen and the NDs in it and such. The Black Magic gentleman was on the screen during the unveiling, and he says, "Now, this enjoys the ergonomics that our customers love." I mean, is he deaf? Because here's the thing about Blackmagic, right? And speaking specifically about the pocket cameras here in that line, there are a few things that um, everybody agrees about with Blackmagic. Okay, everybody agrees that Blackmagic is a market disruptor. Everybody agrees that the image is beautiful. Blackmagic image, it's a good image. It really is. It does have an IR pollution type of problem, but the Blackmagic is the image is beautiful. Everybody likes the B-raw codec. Everybody I've ever known that's worked with it likes it. Um, Everybody also hates. Like, hate is not a strong enough word for how everybody feels about the camera that is a plastic football. It's hard to fly on a gimbal. It's ugly. It's cheap feeling. Feels like plastic. They say it's like you know carbon impregnated, whatever the such. Right? It's plastic. It's a plastic football. Um, we don't want that black magic. We want a red Komodo type of camera, something that's modular. If you're going to have to rig it anyway, and you certainly do have to rig black magic pocket cameras, we're going to have to rig it anyway. Then we want something that is this, and it's a center of gravity that we can then put a handle on, and we can put a battery on back of, and we put a lens in front of. Because when you build out this shape, it's a lot easier to deal with than when you build out this shape. So will they give us a box style cinema camera in 2023? Gosh, I hope so. And the other thing that they don't have compared to like say Red is autofocus. And I was thinking about this. Sorry, my brain took a nosedive as I was talking there. Um, Red's doing face detect autofocus on their app. It's not on their camera. So they with the Red Control app, that's how they do the face detect. And it's got such little latency. I mean, it's really a fantastic app. That's what every company can do better is take a look at Red's app, their control app. Put one of those in your camera, it's a completely different story. So I'll share the comments here. Okay, King Truck Gaming, let's go Nikon. Hey, you know what? I'm rooting for Nikon. I really am. I love Nikon cameras. I do. Maybe that tells you how old I am. Still never seen a Pentax though. Okay, also King Krug. I shot with an Ari. It was uninspiring. Sometimes it's better not to meet your hero. Well, what is it? What is it that was uninspiring about it? Was it just like a turd to use, or I mean, everything that I've seen about it on the images is beautiful. All right, Florian Koch visuals. If there was no Komodo, I'd shoot on the Pocket 6K, but there is. Komodo is just that slight bit better in pretty much every way. Not by much, but still enough. I agree. And I think I made a video about this too. So I bought the Pocket 6K first before I got the Komodo. And was this is when Komodos were very hard to get. They were new and everybody wanted one. And it's kind of like the FX6 thing, right? It's like hurry up and wait. Might get you 1 to 6 8 months or whatever. So I bought a Pocket 6K. I thought, well, it's kind of the same thing, and it is kind of the same thing. Um, I still have the Pocket 6K. I've thought about selling it, but I don't know. Maybe I'll hang on to it. So let's see. Face detect will be on the camera soon. Face detect will be on the camera soon on the Pocket 6K. ELQ quality as well. I don't know what ELQ quality means. So, let's see. Rodrigo Basile Rodrigo, are you the, are you Brazil guy, from my last stream? If so, then, my condolences. Brazil got beat in the World Cup by somebody who they shouldn't have, over the past, couple days. Just shooting with an A6500, Rodrigo says. Yeah, the A6500 is a solid camera. Like it really is. Depending on what you want to do with it, but there's nothing wrong with that camera. I still have an A7 III. I mean that's kind of the same generation, right? A6500, A7 III. Okay. Let's find a Komodo. Oh, Komodo face to take up. Oh, it'll be on the cameras. Okay, so he's saying it's not just the so what Florian's saying is it's not just the face detect on the app, but they're going to make it as on the camera probably as like a firmware update or something soon too. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it works pretty well. I've played with it. I haven't tried to do anything professional with it. I'm still on the fence actually about if I want to keep going down the Komodo, the red rabbit hole, or if I want to continue to explore Canon bodies. Because the C70 is a really nice camera, and I think there's going to be some more Canon cinema cameras coming out. And my whole thing was, I've got this pile of RF lenses that I kind of amassed for the Komodo, and the Komodo is it's it's awesome, and I love working with it, but it's always just a thing, compared to the mirrorless cameras. There are 15 other things to remember and to do with the Komodo, and the files are enormous, and it's just a thing. Um, so the thing is, as I get older, especially, but just as my business grows to the point where at some point, hopefully, those in business are there. It's going to get to the point where you have some decisions to make as far as growth is concerned. Because the workload is getting beyond the point that you can service it yourself. And one of the first things that you try to do before you start hiring or contracting things out is how can I shore up my system to be more efficient? And as much as I love shooting on red, it just is more of a deal, more of a big deal to shoot on red, and to that whole workflow and ecosystem is just more difficult to do. They still don't have a good audio option, so you're always shooting audio separately. Versus like, I don't know, can I just get a couple C70s and call it a day? I mean, am I really gonna miss that 6K? Am I really gonna miss the flexibility R3D gives me? And if I do miss those things, was that a good trade-off to make for a camera that has an amazing amount of dynamic range? C70 and the DJO sensor is it's a beautiful sensor. So it's an amazing amount of dynamic range. Um, C-Log 2 is C-Log 2. I mean, it's great. It's been making money for people all over the world for a long time. Uh, it natively has the RF lens mount. Those lenses are fantastic. The battery life is huge. It has onboard audio that sounds good on the C70. There's a lot to like there, and you don't have to rig the thing to the moon just to give it this and that. And, okay, now I need time code because I got time code on my audio recorder. And it's just, it's easier, you know. Okay. Flooring Koch will run on the camera and not just the app. Yeah. Let's see. So King Krut Gaming. So the RE picture didn't blow me away. That's interesting. It definitely made for a crew. Yeah, they are made for a crew. Trying RAW was a nightmare. I have a BCPU rig, and ProRes is meh. Yeah, ProRes is always meh. That's I I get the appeal of ProRes. It's because it's easy to edit, but I've never really been a fan of ProRes. I mean, I'll shoot RAW, or I'll shoot baked in like 10-bit, on whatever, uh, codecs. So, I think C70 makes sense for your workload. I think C70 makes sense for a lot of people's workload. Um, and, like I said, it's just that, like, I'm not shitting on the Komodo here. I love the Komodo. It's one of those things where, you know, it's kinda like a two-year-old child, it's really annoying most of the time, but if somebody tried to take it from you, like, you'd kill 'em, you know? So that's kinda what I am with the Komodo, it's like I love shooting on the Komodo, but, it's always such a chore, you know? Okay. So I know that Rodrigo's shooting on, an A6500. Now what lenses are you shooting, Rodrigo? What kinda work are you doing? Are you doing commercial work? You doing portraiture? What are you doing over there? Let's see. Okay, where was it? So Blackmagic, Zcam. Has anybody ever seen a Zcam? That's another one where it's like, it's like Pentax. It's like, well, I know they're out there. You sell them. I've never seen one. Um, I know. I know one person who bought and uses a Zcam. I think it's the F6. So it's the full frame 6K, which sounds cool, right? I mean, it's full frame, it's 6K, it's very small. Um, he likes it. He shoots real estate and like interviews and stuff like that with it. I don't know a lot about the Z cams. So King Kruk, I really want to like the R5C. You and me too, bud, because I already bought one. Um, you know, uh, I do. I don't know if I like it. It's useful. It's it's useful for this, but I mean, really any camera I have could be useful for this. So I don't know what that says. Uh, it does have so the autofocus is so I have it really, really slow, right? So so the autofocus is probably not going to keep up with me because I have it like stuck on me and it's doing eye, but it moves really, really slow. And I like that about it. I think the focusing system on the cinema side, I mean, and it is stuck, so if it's been autofocused this whole time, I've never once seen it twitch. So that is useful, on the R5C. Everything else, not so much. Okay, Rodrigo, I recently started in real estate. Well, that's awesome, man. So the A6500 with real estate. You gotta be shooting on something wide. So, I would imagine, what do you use it, like a 12 millimeter, maybe on that? King Krut Gaming, I have the Z9 and I feel guilty that I never use it. Laowa 9 millimeter. Wait, were you the dude did you go now you're in Brazil. Did you go to the PMRE conference? Were you the dude that was shot that house with the 9 millimeter that, if so, then I stuck up for you, in that meeting. I have the Z9 to feel guilty that I never use it. Why do you never use it? I don't I'd use the hell out of the Z9 if I had it. I mean, I think, it looks pretty awesome. So so King Prug, what is it that you do, bud? Because I've talked to you back and forth a little bit before. It's not you. Okay. There was somebody at the PMRE conference. I'm gonna make a video about that sometime too, the PMRE conference, where he used the 9 millimeter lens and he was, like, far away from the house, and so all you see is just a bunch of street in front of it, and they were clowning because he was so far away from the house and all you saw was a bunch of foreground, and I kinda stuck up for him and I said, "You know what, though? Like, what I will do pretty often actually is if I have a house that is, let's say, a two-story house, and so it's very tall, it's taller than it is wide, and I am but 5'8" tall. If I stand right in front of this house to where I can now get sorry about that, the height of the house, um, it's gonna be distorted as all get out, right? Because I'm gonna be shooting it at, like, 16 millimeter or whatever, and I'm really close to it. It's gonna be all funhouse, right? So what I will do is I will back up across the street. Now using my 16 to 35, I'll then zoom in to 35 millimeter, so I am minimizing distortion, making the house as big as I can in the frame. I'm still getting the full height of it. Now, understanding if I'm across the street, I'm still going to have mostly foreground in my image. And so I am much closer to the ground than I am the top of the house, which means I'm going to have just an ocean of street in my image. This is why, okay, we shoot high resolution. And one of the things that I like about shooting high resolution, because if I'm shooting the 50 megapixel Sony Alpha 1, okay, I can take that shot. I've now minimized the distortion on the front elevation of the home, and I can drop in the street in the foreground. It will give myself some faux elevation on the house because now the whole frame is gonna move up. I'm still gonna have plenty of megapixels to deal with, and I've minimized the distortion. It doesn't look like a funhouse either. So I do that all the time, you know? I don't know how I got off on the tangent. Oh, because somebody was using a 9 millimeter, they're clowning him for it, because it saw a lot of street. And I said, "No, but wait a second. If it's a high resolution camera, then he can still get a very usable image out of that by taking that street and cropping it in." Okay, I do VFX for hobby. That's why I think I'm staying with Red. Man, you got a lot of expensive cameras for a hobby. I'm guessing you're not married. Either that or you're married to the coolest woman on the face of the planet. So, yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, if you only have a 9 millimeter, I would also encourage you to get, you need at least one other lens, and it would take your real estate photography to a much higher level if you have a lens that's tighter than 9 millimeters that you can do detail shots with, right? And so I do a lot of shots that are like faucets and flowers and things like that. And there's something about just the compression and the shallow depth of field that you get from shooting that with, say, like a 50 millimeter, like a fast 50. And those are pretty cheap. You can get the Sony 51.8, the plastic fantastic for a couple $100 maybe. And that's a great lens just to have in your back pocket. So, you shoot all your wide shots at 9 millimeter and then you shoot house numbers is a big one that I do, right? And so I will go out and shoot the address on the side of the house because that's one of those things that's kind of symbolic for somebody looking at a house and this is going to be your address. And, it's one of those things. So house numbers, faucets, because they're real property, they're not personal property. And so they convey with the house. Other things like, landscaping that's in the ground, like I said, flowers and things like that. You throw 4 or 5 of those in with, with the images that you're delivering, already. It does a great job to both pad the count of images that you're, delivering to the agent, um, set you apart from the cheap photographers in your area. And I don't know if you are a cheap photographer in your area, but I'm not in my area. And so since I'm not cheap, I'm always looking for ways to set myself apart. And the cheap photographers, they just don't take the time to do it, you know. They don't take the time to get those shots. And so that's one of the ways that I can earn my keep, right? So I'm more expensive, but here's why I'm more expensive because I do things like this. So get yourself another like a 50 or something like that. Let's see. Makes perfect sense. Rodrigo, again, I use a 16 to 72.8 for, yeah, perfect. Yeah, for details. Shoot those details, man. And what's funny is like when I started doing this in this area, when I started doing stuff like that, like the faucets and the numbers and things like that, there really wasn't anybody else doing it. Not in my area right here. And it's funny because the agents would say, I can always tell when they're your photos because I know, that you're going to get these shots. Uh, Now people are doing it. I want to claim responsibility for that. I don't know if I, responsible for or not. If these agents like, hey, I want you to start doing this like this guy. I don't know if I'm responsible for that trend shift or not, but it seems like more people in my area are doing what I used to only do. So now I got to think of something else that's going to make me stand apart. Okay, so Zcam. Um, I touched on this a little bit. So I have on here the FX6, and I might make a whole nother video about this where there was and sorry, I'm, like, playing with my pen the whole time, it's probably, like, squeaking and stuff on the thing, I'm gonna put it down. Uh, so the FX6, Sony did something that's really bad here, okay? And a lot of people have been giving Canon flack about the third-party RF lens thing, and I'm somebody who from day one, I've been on Canon side with this, that is abs as a commercial photographer, okay, I am always trying to chase people and have them not steal my images. I just got a call, from an agent, just recently about this, right? Those are mine, I've made them. That's my property. And same thing with Canon and their RF lens mount. They can decide to allow companies to develop for that mount or not because it's their intellectual property. And that's that, period. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's giving people opportunity or not. That's theirs and it's within their right to protect it. Now, if they open it up and allow all the, Chinese companies to start making lenses, well, that's great. And you get, and you get more variety that way, but they certainly don't owe that to anybody. It's their decision to make whether they want their mount to be open source or not. Okay. So everybody was all, mad about that, but in my mind, Sony has done something much worse. And what Sony has done much worse over this past year or two is the thing with the FX6 and the back order of it. And now I know that we live in a world right now where supply chains are stressed and China especially. And I imagine that a lot of the electronics and the chips and stuff in the FX6 are probably coming from China. Um, they have a problem with COVID and a government that is very stringent on, the lockdowns and stuff like that. And, it's affecting Apple's bottom line, so it's probably affecting Sony's bottom line too. I get all that. Okay. But at the same time, all these other companies have found a way to get these products out. Sony is even more problematic with the FX6, not because they're just not shipping the FX6, but because you have to keep in mind what the FX6 is. Okay, so the FX6 is not typically a camera that is aimed toward enthusiasts. Okay, the FX6 is a cinema camera that is often bought by working professionals. These are production companies that have contracts in place that they need to deliver on. And so when you order something and it's back ordered, well, that's fine. Okay. And it's even fine if it's going to be back ordered for a period of time. But what's not fine is not knowing, you know. And Red was doing this with the Komodo when it was brand new, and they actually got their act together. You can get a Komodo right now. As of right now, today, you still can't get an FX6. They said they were going to be available in December. And on B&H, okay, they had some FX6s available and they ran out, right away. So what are we looking at now? Next December, And so this is bad, man. It's bad because it's a product that is aimed at and used by professionals, and you're leaving people high and dry if they've ordered this thing and not delivering it. And to add insult to injury, then they unveiled a PTZ cam, a couple of them that are basically an FX6 on a pan tilt head. That's basically what those cameras are, those PTZ cameras. And it's like, well, wait a second, you're making new products and you're going to get these things to market, but people that have FX6 orders, you're not going to use those parts to fulfill that first. You're going to do this PTZ thing. So I'm kind of disenchanted with Sony about that whole thing. 'Cause, let's see, King Crook buy cameras and lenses for hobby too, but I am now committed to Red. So by proxy, I'll be in the Canon system now. That's how I got into the Canon system, is by proxy because of Red. And so I got the Komodo and soon realized how awesome the RF lenses the RF that's really the thing, it's like, I wanna use those lenses. That's why I'm going down this Canon rabbit hole, and trying to see if they're better than the Sonys, and for the stills work, so far, no, they're not. The A1, pretty much, throttles everything else in its path. Okay. Possibly a Canon system. I'm an SLR, DSLR, Nikon guy. I love Nikons, man. Like, I really do. I hope Nikon, makes it. So, I have been yammering on for about an hour, so thank you for the 3 or 4 of you who have joined me here. I know that I'm not a big streaming channel, but I also know that my channel continues to grow, and so maybe someday I'll have, more robust streaming shows and I'll get into some of that other software that allows me to bring up comments on the screen. I might do that anyway, because like you say, King Kruk Gaming, y you know, cameras and lenses are your hobby. This is kind of my hobby too. I am so blessed. I tell people this, right? Um, I love doing this just as a hobby. Right now, my wife and kids are at something that they went to. I'm gonna use the opportunity to sit down and stream because I like doing it, the camera thing. But I tell people I'm so blessed because I found something that I'm good at and that I'm into, and also found a way to make a very good living at it, you know? And most artists and most people who are passionate about things never find a way to make a living doing it. So I just I'm thrilled about that, and that's one of the reasons I do my YouTube channel. Is I'm not making any money on this YouTube channel, but if I can help somebody who, like Rodrigo there, if he can take anything from me that helps him there in Brazil shoot real estate and be successful at it, that's awesome, man. Maybe that's what it's all about, you know? Yeah. Alright, thanks, King Crook. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. Do more of these lives. Hopefully, you change your stance on the R5C. I don't gosh, man, like, I don't know, it's okay. So, I will though, bud. Alright, everybody. Thanks for joining me. I'll see ya.